the blind pick matters a lot because they have a lot of different comps which have or answers for a lot of different things, but if they don't come with the right answer right away on a grand arena, then I think they can get jumbled when it does go to a best-of-5 series, and they can be behind in that way because they don't really specialize in any particular comp. It seems like they're more focused on counter-comping in this meta.
Definitely, and when we look at the boys, this is a team that also has a lot of comps at their disposal. When you have a player like Smexen, it opens you up to so much, Zico.
Yeah, I mean, Smexen, we've been talking about him for a while, and finally he actually finds a team that can kind of utilize him as a player. In the past, he's been kind of in a similar situation to maybe Gelu in Reformed last year, where he wasn't being utilized properly. Now, though, he finds a home where he can play the Warrior, he can play the Death Knight, and he is one of the key members on that squad, on the boys. And it's nice to see he has a team that puts in the same effort as him and who wants to achieve the same things as him. So this is looking really good just as a year for him.
I mean, it looks like a good year for the boys in general, right? 220 points already, a pretty dominant start to the year. And you look at Gorecki time and time again and said this year just seems to be his year.
Yeah, most certainly is. I think that he's been showcasing the Feral Affinity in particular to a level that we have not seen any other Druid be able to achieve, and it's been the X factor for his team overall to just get a little bit of extra damage added by him taking that extra risk, and it's really paying off. He's definitely a phenomenal player. He's able to multi-class onto other healers as well. We've seen him in the past on Druid and Shaman, so him being versatile, him playing at the highest level, and him taking risks is definitely going to be what puts the boys over the edge.
So we talk about the boys having so many different compositions that they can play, and a lot of them are going to be compositions that are strong in the meta that also involve their mains, right? You look at Thug. Thug is going to be able to play so many different Warlock compositions. You have Chun-Li, who's going to be able to play these Monk compositions. You have Smex, who's going to round out a lot of things. And then we say Never Lucky, they like to counter comp. So what are they going to even think is coming out of the arena in the blind pick on the Grand to start out the day? We are about to find out. But before we give you guys that juicy information as to what they're playing, you can vote right now in the chat. Let us know who you think is going to take it. Is it going to be Never Lucky or the boys? And now we see those comps. The gates are already open.
Yeah, this is the composition we've seen from the boys. This Windwalker Death Knight setup with Gorecki, often playing the Feral Affinity to help get very aggressive. Never Lucky, they're actually going to be bringing in Elemental Shaman Assassination Rogue Resto Druid, and this is a comp we saw yesterday in the European scene, and it seemed quite effective.
Also, Colo and Zach both have Rogue?
Yeah. I mean, Never Lucky might be spreading themselves a little bit thin. I would say that the boys have specialized on this Windwalker Death Knight for this year currently, whereas Valido and Zach are definitely treading into alt territory, trying to take advantage of some of the strategies that Europe debuted yesterday and use them themselves against the boys in a bit of a surprise fashion in game number 1. So far, the momentum is building for the boys as they have forced major defensive cooldowns from Valido quite early on. Crowd control still secured on Colo. Valido may fall within seconds here if they can continue the chain just a tad bit longer. Colo leaves the clone, connects a quick heal. Valido has managed to get space to breathe thanks to Zach's support and will stay in the fight.
Yeah, Valido manages to survive, but for Never Lucky, how long will it last? They need to find some semblance of counter pressure here. Right now, the boys looking good. They have all the momentum in their favor. Haven't been forced defensive at one point in this game. We need to start seeing some setups come in from Never Lucky.
Yeah, it looks like they're going for one right now, trying to take down Chun-Li with good crowd control onto Gorecki, preventing him from healing his teammate, who is still continuing to dip low on health. Diffuse Magic to remove one Maledict and a Dispel to remove the other. Good usage of those abilities to remove that healing absorption, and now the boys look to strike back. Colo with the premeditated Iron Bark did reduce a lot of that threat, allowing himself to easily recover from that attack out by the boys.
Yeah, Valido on the Elemental Shaman is not an easy target by no means. So for Smexen and Chun-Li, it's going to be difficult to actually take them down. Now, I want to see them consistently make swaps onto Zach. As for Zach, he's going to be making a swap over on a Gorecki right now, trying to punish him a little bit, get some pressure for his team. Valido still just trying to do what he can to survive. Colo potentially looking for a drink right now, and we've seen in this meta, in these tournaments so far, it really is important for these Druids to try to sneak off and get drinks when they can. It's all about trying to deny the mana regeneration for these healers.
Yep, most certainly is. I would say that Gurecki has been getting the upper hand of Colo in this match in terms of crowd control, which puts Valido really far on the back foot and potentially close to going down here in game number 1. Multiple defensive cooldowns have been forced out from that attack by the boys. They're in a dominant position. They've got control and a lead in mana. Zach is looking desperately to set something up for his team by constantly switching to Gurecki, locking him in a double stun combo. Gurecki relatively disrespecting the damage there and trades 2 cooldowns, but Valido is still in trouble. The pressure is simply not going anywhere right now for the team of the boys as Valido is getting crushed beneath the weight. Touch of Death is about to go off and Valido could easily go down to its explosion of damage. He ducks around the corner. Touch of Death ticks. Smexen looks to close this out. Chun-Li in hot pursuit. Valido holds on by a thread but ultimately falls and the boys take game number 1.
Okay, we got a lot to talk about. Ellie Rogue, this is one of those compositions that we see yesterday, and all of a sudden Zico starts saying, wait, this is a strong composition, especially in this meta. It's not going to have some of the weaknesses of the mage, so you're basically getting rogue mage that doesn't have the ability to spam out polymorphs, but it's still able to do a lot of things, especially in lane dampening. We knew it was a composition that could be strong, but it was yesterday that we really did see it kind of become a thing. You can see already that they're having Zach on the rogue when Colo has been the rogue for this team. What do you think of it right now, Zico, as a decision to go into this composition?
I feel like Never Lucky probably saw the European tournament yesterday and kind of thought, oh, this looked good, let's try it. It didn't look like they were well rehearsed on it, though, as they went down before dampening even kicked in. They also didn't really have that same aggressive coordination that we saw from teams like ABC yesterday when they played it. I don't know. I wasn't too impressed, honestly. It could also be a case of just Chun-Li and Smexen putting up a lot more pressure than the European Cleaves did yesterday. Chun-Li definitely just a king on the Monk in my mind, and I think they need to swap off this comp because it wasn't convincing at all.
Valido actually wasn't running the puppy NASCAR build in that game, so he wasn't running Spectral Recovery and he wasn't running Spirit Wolf. He was taking Earth Shield and Traveling Storm, so I don't think he was really expecting to be a target. But with the current meta, you want percentage-based healing, especially if it's on yourself, so that you can survive while your healer is crowd controlled. So Colo sat through a lot of crowd control. Valido missed out on a lot of extra healing, which is what made him look so much more fragile. I think in the matchup in particular, he could just change his build and that might just be enough.
It's pretty funny that we just saw these two teams start the day off by doing the most on-brand things possible. And we're talking about the fact that we're worried about Never Lucky trying to countercomp too much, maybe spreading themselves too thin, and ultimately they have Zach and Colo, both of their healers who now play Rogue. They're playing a composition that we just saw yesterday. They're not going to have enough time potentially to wargame it enough. You're saying maybe you even see some mistakes into what you see in the build, and then the boys, they just get to rock mains. I mean, Smexen at this point, it seems like really DK is going to be his bread and butter. It's what we expect to see from him.
Yeah, sometimes in metas, there's just compositions that are just solid overall. Sometimes it's Rogue Mage Priest. Sometimes it's Elemental Shaman, Warlock, Druid. Sometimes it's a jungle. And those comps are just so powerful, very durable, lots of crowd control, just overall really good. And when you're running alts into those comps and you don't necessarily have the best experience, especially into a high caliber team like the boys, it just becomes really difficult, and counter comping just doesn't work out nearly as well, especially if it doesn't seem like you're that familiar with that setup or matchup.
Also, this is the blind, right? So when you're trying to counter comp something, you ultimately don't know what you're running into. It's a game of I think that they think that we think that I think that they think that we think, right? So when you are in this first game, we don't even know if this is what they necessarily did expect to play into, but it's important when you do say how stable a composition like what the boys are running is, because let's say you have that 60-40, well, that 60-40 is still reliant on mistakes being made, and you're not going to see the boys make any mistakes with this composition. Chun-Li being empowered right now to get to play the Monk, I think that's probably the biggest criticism that you can really have of Chun-Li, right, is the fact that maybe he didn't diversify throughout last year.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's one of the things that potentially hurt Super Frogs, is they didn't really have much diversity last year. And for the boys this year, this meta is looking good for them. They have Gurecki and Smexen, who are very versatile. You know, Thugonomics, he plays the Demon Hunter as well as the Destruction Warlock. But Chun-Li, there are some questions. I mean, he is one of the best monks in the game, potentially the best in all of North America, but he doesn't really play anything else at a super high level that I've seen yet. And I think if monks aren't necessarily the best, then the boys might struggle because of that.
And I've heard you sing praises to how he does play the monk. I want to ask you, as somebody who has competed, how important do you think it is for the boys when you see Chun-Li and Thugonomics? Obviously, this is a pair that's not going to be brought in this second game, but how important is it to be on a squad where you have, even if it's just one player that you want to play with, that you want to be on the same team with, you want to duo with, regardless of who the other players are on the team sometimes?
Well, I think it's something that is potentially underrated by a lot of people, being able to build up synergy in terms of the way you communicate, as well as the strategies you evolve and implement over a long period of time. And I think the longer you can hold on to those relationships, as long as they're working out for you, if you're seeing success, it's just an added benefit. You know, there's classic duos in this game, Wealthy Man playing with Animals for such a long time as an example, you know, Raikou and Waz, and these players getting to play with each other for that long is nothing but beneficial for them.
Yeah, and now you can definitely think about that with the boys. We're going to see a change, though, coming out from Never Lucky. How do you feel about this one?
Arcane Windwalker Rest Druid. I feel like
they're just stealing Europe meta.
They're just copying the European meta here.
I mean, Colo played the monk too
yeah,
week?
this is why I just let out a big size. I feel like Never Lucky, this is the one thing I was really afraid of them. I don't know. I've never seen Pack Rats play Mage. I've never seen Zach on the Windwalker Monk. We talked about Zach being a phenomenal multi-classer, but I don't think this is one of those matchups where it's a massive counter comp. I think you actually have to play it really well, know what you're doing if you want to have a chance to win. I mean, maybe they'll prove me wrong, but I don't think this is going to go well for Never Lucky.
I have to agree with Van. I think Never Lucky they're going to be in deep waters here.
This is pretty crazy to kind of see. I wonder why they are prioritizing Colo on the Druid so much too. That definitely seems like something we can kind of see out of it.
I know. Druids are pretty good. I mean, if you want to run with any healer right now, if you could run with one healer on your team, it would be a Resto Druid right now.
But they've completely just switched everything around it, right? So like now all of a sudden Colo is going to be playing the Druid, which means Zach is literally picking up the classes which Colo was playing. Tolvaron Arena, we got a big map, and we got some big questions. I think that's basically where we sit right now. What will Never Lucky be able to string together, trying so many different things out? We want to hear what you guys thought as well. 6% of you think that Never Lucky might be able to take it, but 94% of you are not feeling these counter-comping plays that are coming out. This may be the most dominant vote that we've ever had.
That's not looking lucky there. 6% of you at home think Never Lucky are going to take it. And I mean, they seem desperate. They're just trying to pull out strategies that they saw in the other region, maybe with not enough practice under their belt. And the boys have focused so heavily on this composition, which is just well-rounded and good into most things. So if you perform at the highest level, you're easily going to outclass your opponents that are desperately trying to scramble with something to counteract it. Here on Tolvaron Arena, at least, Never Lucky have set a good stage for themselves for a great performance, but now they need the execution to back it up.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, Zach in this matchup, he's running Tiger Eye Brew, which I have to disagree with. Smexen on the Death Knight is going to be pretty resistant to magic, especially with anti-magic shell. It's going to negate a lot of the damage you're able to do with Tiger Eye Brew. So I'm not exactly sure what the game plan is of Never Lucky is. Potentially they want to be looking for swaps on a Gorecki with an all-in. They could potentially use Serenity, which he's spec'd into, with Tiger Eye Brew and try to take him down through bear form, but I think that's going to be really difficult.
And also, if you guys want to be checking the Azurite traits that these guys are rocking in the arena, if you want to see the gear, if you want to see those choices in talent, you can use the plugin right now, powered by Wowhead, and you can see everything that Venruki just pointed out to you on the stream. It's Zach going to be taking some pressure here.
Yeah, yep. Zach getting lowered, forced to trade out the Touch of Karma immediately. Colo now into a Cyclone. Gorecki playing very offensive in these matchups, and I named Gorecki the MVP of last tournament just with how he was able to perfectly balance his offense and defense, push in when his team needed it, look for crowd control at opportune moments. Colo, unfortunately, into a polymorph right now. I think that actually got Dark Stimuli prom by Smexen. So Smexen's been doing a really good job with that ability, stealing some of these crowd control spells from Pack Rats and Colo, and getting his team some opportunity in the match to get some pressure rolling.
I'm curious if Gorecki is running Feral Affinity in this specific matchup, because if he is, he may be a target. No, actually opting to run Balance Affinity, so he wants to avoid polymorphs, get some extra range on his heals. It's a smart decision on Tolvaron. Smexen finally being pressured here by Never Lucky, but able to trade defensive cooldowns and recover. Now Chun-Li looks to reverse some damage in their team's favor. There has been signs of life for Never Lucky here in Game 2. A couple of close calls. No major defensive cooldowns pulled on their part. That Icebound Fortitude, definitely a major objective for them to get from Smexen throughout the fight. If they can get through that just as dampening starts to ramp up, he is going to be a vulnerable target and potentially a kill for the team of Never Lucky. Colo playing far away, Gorecki chasing him around, looking for Cyclones. Gets counterspelled. That could put his team behind. Smexen getting pressured. They desperately want to pull that Icebound Fortitude from Smexen, but without dampening, Deathstrike appears to be enough for Smexen to stabilize.
Yeah, Smexen should ultimately be able to survive, but Zach in that last attempt with Serenity, well, that was a scary amount of damage for Smexen to really deal with, so pay attention to that cooldown for Zach. It's got about 25 seconds left. It's that teal icon below his character, and when he has that up, he's going to be able to do big damage, reduces the cost of basically all your chi spenders, increases your damage, and also reduces the cooldown of all those abilities. So it's a triple threat, offensive cooldown. It can be really scary when they have that active.
Yeah, it definitely is. Arcane Power currently active for Pack Rats, but getting crowd controlled and denied on some of the burst here potentially. We see the boys going after Colo, trying to make a swap onto the healer, as a classic Windwalker Death Knight is known to do. Colo is able to make a quick escape back to the pillar in that bear farm, now restabilizing. Mana fairly even on both sides. Gorecki is now looking to turn that in his own team's favor by sitting down for a drink. Polymorph actually Dark Simulacrum by Smexen, I believe, as Cola was tossed into that for a moment, but no real effective damage able to get thrown out off the back of it. Gorecki's just going after Pack Rats a tad bit, trying to add whatever he can to the fight to do a little bit of extra damage for his team, especially in this long, dampening, slow-paced meta as a healer. You want to do everything in your power to add any extra damage you can. It can definitely get you a mana lead later on in the fight. Zach activating some powerful, aggressive cooldowns to try and take down Smexen. You really want to see an Icebound Fortitude trade for this touch of death, but they're not even denting Smexen.
Yeah, Smexen really hasn't been under too much pressure in this matchup. Colo caught into the bash. Gorecki once again looking for some crowd control. Smexen under fire right now. Chun-Li sitting on Pack Rats. I actually don't like that. I really want them to just continue the pressure onto Zach. I think chasing around the Arcane Mage isn't necessarily the most bang for your buck. You want to be that distraction as the Arcane Mage, pulling off the melee, forcing them to do limited damage. And I think it's better for these teams to just try to pressure someone else, go after Colo, go after Zach in these matchups. You're going to get a lot more done.
Yeah, most certainly will be the case as the boys look to make a swap to Colo once again, locking him down in an Asphyxiate. However, with Thorns prematurely activated, they decide to abandon that swap and go back to attacking Zach. Zach's smartly just avoiding the fight while his healer is crowd controlled. That's definitely an effective way of avoiding death. If your healer is in crowd control, just run your character far away from the enemy team and try and avoid them as long as possible. Definitely a strength that a Windwalker Monk brings into the arena, even though Zach is multi-classing onto, I don't know if he's really going to show us every single class in the game at this point, but he may be able to. Definitely good defensive awareness on his part. We do not see him running a similar build to what Blizzo was running in this composition. I do not see any grapple weapons from Zach, instead trying to take advantage of that Tiger Eye Brew to get through some of the plate armor, but as you already pointed out, Vinruki, Death Knights are durable to magic damage as well, so the Tiger Eye Brew may not be as valuable as denying Deathstrike with that grapple weapon.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair assessment of the matchup. And Zach as well, like I said, he's been playing the Serenity. It is a bigger burst cooldown, but it's going to be less consistent damage, and your burst is going to be up a little bit less often with that ability. So the consistent pressure on Smexen isn't going to be as high, but your one-shot potential is a little bit higher with that build Zach is running. So far, in terms of mana, Gorecki's doing quite well, still at 60%. Colo just a little bit behind as we move into 8% dampening. Good pressure here from Chun-Li and Colo. Ring of Peace backs him up by Zach. Nicely done to keep Colo alive, but Colo needs to try to escape at this point. He's tanking out a lot of this damage with Iron Bark. Smexen, Chun-Li, they're turning their attention onto Zach now. And I like what the boys are doing. They're making sure they have multiple pressure points, forcing Colo to keep hots on multiple targets. Now they ultimately force out the Touch of Karma from Zach.
I'm curious if Chun-Li's going to touch of karma and try and go for a kill. It seems like they're more happy just punching away at Colo, turning him into a bear punching bag. Chun-Li gets bashed up as Colo tries to set up some burst for his team and escape to safety, managing to get around the corner. There is decent damage establishing itself for the team of Never Lucky. Mana is still equivalent. It's still anyone's match at this point as dampening continues to rise. Counterspell secured onto Gorecki, interrupting some of his incoming healing. His team, although, seems to be stable. Zac getting cycloned up at low HP. Gorecki doing a great job to capitalize on that balance affinity to control up the team as much as possible, giving his melee more breathing room to avoid being crowd controlled themselves. Now deciding to cyclone up Colo, and once again Zac using his kiting. Chun-Li actually put his Transcendence on top of Zac's, so when Zac tried to escape with it, Chun-Li could immediately follow him as they are playing the same class, the Windwalker Monk. Good decision making there on Chun-Li's part. Interesting little knockback there by Chun-Li to try and disrupt some of the Fists of Fury damage. Definitely skill capped on that Windwalker, but likely further dampening is required for these punishing plays to really play out.
Yeah, Chun-Li putting some pressure onto Zac. Zac doing a decent job kiting away, trying to avoid a lot of that pressure coming in, but unfortunately, while he's running away, he's not able to really get out too much pressure, and in the meantime, Smexon's been all over Colo, really taxing his mana. Gorecki, I believe right now, is sitting down in stealth, looking for a drink. Packrats was able to shut it down, I believe. Gorecki doesn't have that much of a mana lead, but with Colo almost completely and the amount of pressure that the boys have been putting out in this matchup, I feel like it's just a matter of time before Never Lucky goes down.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's looking to be the case. They really haven't gotten any major objectives. Colo is constantly pinned in bear. He's completely tapped on mana. If he is not able to escape to safety, he's likely to go down soon. Zac is now left behind. They could cleave him up. Gorecki jumps into the fight to stun Zac and deny the drink. Definitely top-level decision-making on Gorecki's part. Zac forced to trade Touch of Karma once again to stay in the fight just that little bit longer. Colo still has Innervate, so he can make all of his healing spells free. That's going to be his last lifeline, really, in this fight. Afterwards, he doesn't have anything to work with. Finally, some counter pressure coming out from Never Lucky towards Smexon. Can they get that major objective? Can they get the Icebound Fortitude on this push? They really need to, and they do. They managed to stay in the fight.
Yeah, Smexon with the anti-magic shell should be able to survive, but Gorecki caught into the bash. There's really not too much left for him. Smexon has to keep himself alive as Gorecki caught into the full polymorph. This is a beautiful setup coming in from Never Lucky. This would be a miracle if they could take down Smexon with the setup, but it gets denied by Chun-Li's double leg sweep. Packrats decides to just ice block out of that, trying to get aggressive. I don't mind that play as Arcane Mages are very difficult to take down. It looked like could potentially land a kill, but ultimately Smexon will survive, and now that Zac doesn't have his Serenity available, I think Smexon should be fine until that's back up.
One thing I will say for Never Lucky is if they can get these compositions up to the same level as the top tier teams running them, they definitely could be a real threat. They're still in it here in game number 2 as they try to battle it back in the lower bracket. Both these teams facing elimination, and Colo is in dire straits. Desperate times right now to survive. Will he manage to escape to safety? Stunning up Smexon, ducking around the corner, able to avoid death for now. Packrats with Arcane Power up. He's just mashing out spell steals to try and strip off the heal over time effects of Gorecki, forcing Gorecki to be tapped on mana. Gorecki actually trying to sit down for a drink. Both Druids completely out of mana. Momentum swinging actually quite even at this point with 31% dampening setting foot into the match. Colo's got good distance. Zac trades. Smexon recovers. Both teams stabilized, but now Zac stunned. Crowd control secured onto Colo with 2 members taken out of the match for a period of time. It will be difficult for Colo to ultimately save Zac, and it is not going to be enough off the back of a Dark Simulacrumed Poly. Perfect play on Smexon's part. They advance to match point.
Looks like Saturday may be for the boys. We're going to see them grab a quick 2 wins here. Zico, what do you want to see Never Lucky do in these next coming games?
I want to see Never Lucky kind of default a little bit back to the things that we've seen them run in the past. We've seen some Warlock-based compositions come out of these guys. We've seen Zac on the Demon Hunter, things like that seem to be working for them in the past, so I want to see them go back to their roots. These quite obvious alt compositions, I just don't think they have the reps on them to make them work against a team like the boys. The boys, I mean, they're the top earners in the region. You're not going to have a potential triple alt comp come in here and just beat them just because you counter them. I feel like they should stick to their guns more.
I also do want to say, if you remember yesterday, we talked quite a bit about Arcane Mages, and you see Packrats here. He's able to do just whatever he wants, nobody even paying attention to him, and that is when an Arcane Mage is at its least dangerous, Zico.
Yep.
You're just running around doing nothing. And that was something that I think you said that was really important yesterday, and we talked about it quite a bit. When is Arcane Mage the best? When people are looking at it, when people are trying to actually stop it, because you can just do everything in the world. You can chrono shift, you can blink, I think it's 10 billion times, right? So we saw that not only was this counter comp used, which was an alt comp, the boys knew how to play into it. So the question is, what is Never Lucky going to do? Because if they don't go with something that maybe they're a little bit more comfortable with, the boys may grab a quick 3-0. Maybe not necessarily in the blind pick, but after we saw what that composition could do, I think it makes a lot of sense after yesterday for people to say, oh, we want to play this. And maybe you take the risk, you try to play it, you see what you can get done, especially if you do have some more games on it. But after you have one of those games, I think very quickly you need to say, let's go back home. Let's go back to something that we do know. We'll have to see if this is enough for Never Lucky pulling out the mirror here with their backs against the wall.
All right, Colo going with that renewal, whereas Gurecki is going with wild charge. So Colo is much more afraid of being targeted down, but he will have limited mobility as a result, which allows Gurecki to be a lot more of a playmaker, already initiating great crowd control and forcing massive destruction across the board. Zach is just portaling to try and get to safety, but he's so far away from Colo. Tries to make it across the map. Triple Maledict. Ursul's Vortex pulls. Is he just going to die in the opener off the back of Gurecki's play? He is completely owned in Game 3.
Ring, ring, it's your alarm clock. Wake up, we're already through the first series of the day. We just saw Never Lucky get torn apart like soft bread covered in water, and the boys were vicious seagulls chewing them to pieces.
You know what? I actually have a funny story about that in Sydney with Joe Fernandez.
Wait, okay. Well, there's really not much to analyze in that last game, so I guess we'll talk about Joe Fernandez feeding seagulls.
I remember we got coffee, and he got really hungry. He wanted a sandwich, and he was walking along the water with me, and then suddenly bunch of these seagulls start walking beside him. I'm like, seagulls are kind of getting close, and he's like, yeah, that's fine. And they literally snatched the sandwich right out of his hands, freaked him out. I've never seen a warrior so terrified.
Those seagulls were in Ferraris.
Yeah, and now Zach, you can see he's forced to use so much early on. The Gladiator Safeguard gets procced, his Touch of Karma, Diffuse Magic, and Colo's just been taken out of the fight. You can see Gurecki just throwing out the Cyclones. Eventually, Zach gets back to Colo, but the Iron Bark just isn't enough. Another Maledict comes in. Good Ring of Peace there by Chun-Li, denying the heals, and that's it. It was over before it started.
Yeah, well, Never Lucky, we'll see you next week. This is a team where I am 100% confident that we are going to see them next week, right? Like, they have consistently made it into the top 8. I think they've made it into the top 8 more times than Method Orange has, right? So this is a team that we know is consistent at the very least. They always get to at least here. They have 80 points coming into today. I'm not quite sure how many they'll get for this placing, but they've racked up a couple
12,
more
I think.
points. Yeah, something like that. So they're going to gain a couple points here, but this is a disappointing performance from them. But this is also not the matchup that you want. I think one of the reasons we see them try all these different compositions, they're going against the best team in North America right now. You got to be a little scared.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it comes down to as well. Never Lucky got really unlucky this week because the boys, the team that won the last cup, came second in the first cup. This team is in the lower bracket somehow. So it's like we have a shark down there just feeding off these teams now. And of course, if you play the Windwalker DK Mirror against the boys, that's not the situation you want to be in to begin with. And they tried, try to counter them, but ultimately the counter comping didn't work. And I like that they at least went with it. I don't think this game 1 here of the Mirror really was representative of how evenly they would be matched. I think Gurecki just made nice plays in the start, and then Chun-Li made a really good play as well, and they just underused their cooldowns. I think Colo should have just trinketed that first Cyclone and try to keep his team going.
So we think about these bubble teams right now, and you go, I can think of one team that's definitely happy with the performance there, and that's going to be the Rejects. I'm not memeing about Jamili right now, but they had 80 points coming into today. And when you look at the bracket, you're going to see they're already situated in a better place. So they know that they're going to get more points. So they're going to pull ahead now from Never Lucky.